My favourite actor is Josh O'Connor, and he has been since God's Own Country. He has range in ways that are hard to describe, and I love his work. From Elton to Patrick Swayze to Prince Charles to Durrells to Mothering Sunday to whenever the new Knives Out movie comes out, that is my guy, you know? And I have to say, I have a very few actors I truly ride for. For those interested, I would say it's him, Gerard Jerome and Tatiana Maslany. And of that, Josh O'Connor is like a very proper movie watcher, not in comparison to them, but in comparison to other ones, unlike some of these movie fakers that are in the business. I'm very excited to watch his Letterboxd video and kind of like take and watch my own.
Okay, these are my 4 favourite movies.
So he's always super prepared for his roles and makes all these cool scrapbooks for them, which made me want to see what he thought were genuinely his favourites.
Personal scrapbooks and just images and letters that I've sent or received or things that I like.
This is a popular video type to do for books, like watching or reading people's favourites. I've done it before in regards to book, I'll put them up there, but those take ages, and if I don't like the book that they like, I end up hating making that video. But I love watching these kinds of videos, and they give me a small insight into these celebrities, whether they've given a sort of curated answer of how they want to see them or not. I also like the videos where people watch an entire director's filmography as he spell out something personal about them. I think art just generally has a way of doing that, but what they say they prefer also says something. It could be the same as their work, or it could also spill an entirely different sentiment to what they're in. So I thought I'd watch all of these movies and find out. I watched was Accatone, and as Letterboxd would put it, Accatone is the story of a pimp with no other means to provide for himself who finds his life spiraling out of control when his prostitute is sent to prison. The movie is part of the Italian sort of neo-realist era of cinema, and it's generally a very interesting portrayal of Rome. The location is desolate and dirty, and it resembles a landfill before anything else, and I've been there and it doesn't really look like this. Maybe there's just touristy parts and therefore I wasn't seeing any of this, but it was cool to see the old textures of this world regardless within this film. The landscape is juxtaposed by the over-dramatic score, all of which is taken from Bach's work, giving the film an impressive classical tone over a very cold standard of a film. Accatone, the character's goodness is few and far between, only seen when letting a woman and her family live with him and his girl in their house for seemingly no reason. He's generally a detestable protagonist and a misogynist attention seeker, one that is deeply upset at the idea of working for his money, believing in his work being worth more than what he would be paid for it, and therefore he should not have to work at all. In turn, he exploits his girl the same way, forcing her into prostitution and using her hard-earned money to live a comfortable life instead. I much prefer this movie to Salo, which is the only other Pasolini film that I've ever seen. And if I've got to explore the concept of sex and abuse in a realist sense, I'd much rather it look like this than what Salo does. And I know that's specifically like about the Tales of Sodom, but I did. This film eventually delves into a bizarro dream sequence and visceral visual stills of pain, which reinforce the confusing and hurtful world that they live in. And though that is an abrupt change from the biting reality, we are introduced to highlighting a sense of new beginnings. Additionally, I love that the only person I follow on Letterboxd who has logged this is Martin Scorsese. You know, it's lovely to see that Marty also really liked this film. An off-site development about this film, however, is that my literal last video discusses the film Red Rocket, and I cannot stop myself from seeing the similarities here in this film. A man who uses sex for money tries to abuse and gaslight a new woman in his pursuit for money and safety after the last woman gave up on him. The tone and pacing of that film is very reminiscent of this one, and to the extent I refuse to believe that Sean Baker wasn't using this film as inspiration for that one. The concept of these films sharing similarities doesn't really seem to exist online, except from the fact that someone on Reddit said that they spotted a correlation between them like I did. But Red Rocket feels like it is very intentionally putting for this work. And it's Pasolini, so he's not exactly an underground figure of cinema, so I just believe that he probably has seen this, but I don't think he's ever discussed that anywhere. There are 2 Get Merch films on this list, and Kes was the first one that I watched. Kes is the story of Billy Casper, a 15-year-old working class Yorkshire boy who is bullied at school and ignored and abused at home by his indifferent mother and older brother, in that order. He tames and trains his pet Kestrel Falcon, who he names Kes, and is helped and encouraged by his English teacher and fellow students. Eventually, Billy finds a positive purpose to his unhappy existence through his pet. I think this film has gorgeous colouring. That's the main thing that I took away from this immediately. For art that is simply meant to be looking at the modernity and meagre living of Northern England, whilst probably the fact that it looks good is because of it using film, because it's made in the 60s. The colours of the natural world, seen in the open greenery, the farms and the sky, is a vibrant contrast to the cramped suburban housing that we are seen as its foil within this story. Loach is, as I found out, a pretty prolific socialist director, which, you know, big love to him. And his ideology touches much of this film. Billy seems destined for the mines that his brother works at, even though he is determined to prove himself past that. Unaware and unguided as to where to truly apply himself, he is the stereotype of the lost potential of the working class labourer. So whilst proudly and loudly good with animals and taming them, these talents are not seen as important, but as vague interests that he could perhaps just indulge in while he's young. The film even presents Billy as an observant boy, though absent and perhaps even quirky. He's still given a sense of urgency. He understands the way that his teachers treat him and why they do. He can't grasp more than his direct surroundings, yet he's smarter than he first seems. This underlying quality of Billy is the heart of the film. There is this lack of nurturing offered to the boys of this class, and their world is diminished by those who look past them. The film too looks past Billy for a flash moment, where it switches quite abruptly to the adults of the story to look into the future of those in this society. It's not uncomfortably bleak. These people are a reality after all, but it's still quite safe, quite insular and boring in a way that Billy, with his odd fancies, could be without. And honestly, he'd probably want more than this, and that's essentially what the story tries to tell us. Looking for Eric is the second Ken Loach film on this list, and honestly I'm blown away at how much I did not see coming out of this film. So it's about a guy whose name is Eric, and I thought that would lead us through an internal struggle and search for Eric, or a thrilling tale of actually looking for some dude named Eric. So tell me why Eric Cantona, Man United centre forward / normal forward, I don't know a lot about football, I've just put this on to kind of emulate that I care, is a character in this film. You know, he's not a version of him. Like Eric Cantona, the actual footballer played by Eric Cantona, is in the film acting. Granted, he's apparently an actor in many things, but immediately you have the feeling that this film is weird. I didn't know that about Eric Cantona. So Looking for Eric is about a man who's also named Eric, trying to find and put his life back on track after an accident. Actual Eric Cantona is playing a fake imagined version of Eric Cantona, who is helping our main character through a hard time, putting him back on the right path and helping him feel better. This film is very 2000s, which is intriguing since Cass felt very 60s. Both adopt the visual style of the decade, having changed with the technical advancement, though the strong socialist themes looking into the inner life of the working class is what still remains throughout Loach's filmography. Eric, the protagonist, is a devoted Man United fan and a postman. He goes on trips to see the team play with his own work team, who are also in turn his proper friends. There is this real sense of community and camaraderie. Eric may feel lost, but he's not alone. You know, he has a family, he has 3 children, a grandchild, and lots of friends. The film is instead a bleak comedy surrounding the vaguely midlife crisis of a man, you know, who has followed the wrong advice his entire life. And so the theme of forgiveness and love permeate the tone of this film. Eric forgives and seeks forgiveness. The world he's built to remain happy in his lifelong crisis is not destroyed in his search for forgiveness from his ex-wife. He is instead stronger because of the life that he's built with his friend. The film champions change, but also the working class lifestyle. There is love and friendship at the heart of this change. The life that has helped you cope all this while is not entirely worse than what is to come. Here again, like Hess, the status quo has not helped the main character, but community and reliance has. Community reliance even has. It's been a bit of a meme on film Twitter that Joshua kind of really likes Ratatouille. Everyone likes Ratatouille, but there's something very wholesome about someone very publicly loving Ratatouille. He's very sweet when he speaks on it, and there's not much to say about Ratatouille that hasn't already been said. So, you know, it's beautiful, it's familiar, and it's a fantastic watch every single time. I've seen the movie countless times. I've seen the beginning of this film in French lessons an unreasonable amount of times. We always start it at the beginning of the film, and even though we'd all seen it, and one lesson isn't long enough to watch all of it, it was just the beginning again and again and again instead of starting it like in the middle. Anyway, this film is really what bears Pixar's heart in a way and time that illustrates all that Pixar is or was. You know, the central villain in this is a greedy chef wanting to franchise the business to make a profit, which in the larger scheme of Disney is quite sad that this feels kind of hollow after all that Disney has done. Not that this film is bad because of it, but the irony is bold watching it now. You know, the film as a whole is quite different to the others. It is still in its own way a dissection of society at large. It is totally very bright though, a children's movie that wants to uplift without any undercurrent of reality setting in like the others, you know. Slightly random just about this is that I see that Josh O'Connor really has the mannerisms of a linguini. I wonder if that's part of why he likes it. You know, having recently watched this clip,
Ratatouille. I don't need to say anything about Ratatouille. It's a perfect movie.
and then watching the film, he's so linguini. Linguini in many ways is much more pathetic, yet there's a fun body language similarity there between the two of them. And I wonder if that's part of the charm, you know, of Ratatouille for him. The fifth film is Happy as Lazzaro, and it's an incredible story about a pure-hearted teen named Lazzaro who is content living as a sharecropper in rural Italy. But an unlikely friendship with the Marquise's son will change his world. From the very start of this film, you're thrust into this very odd setting, and in trying to understand the exploitation of Lazzaro and his family and his sort of relationship to this new world, the story shifts again. And whilst I knew going into this film that there was some sort of magical realism involved, it still feels surreal. This film hangs in this hazy and poignant limbo of the world, making it both stunning to look at and very intense to experience. Being set in rural Italy, the film is filled with beautiful shots of rolling hills, rocky mountains, and peaceful greenery, but the buildings too are gorgeous. Everything about the slow cinematography serves to make Lazzaro's naivety and gormlessness and big sparkly doe eyes more enchanting. I don't want to say too much about this film and spoil it because the main thing about this is like a massive spoiler, but it's one that is very unique and well paced, only unveiling moments when I think it was genuinely necessary, and I've really liked this film. It's probably my favourite film that I watched for this video, at least so far. I also felt that there were parts here and there that felt very Tessa Moshfegh coded. The oddities, the serenity, the scrappiness of some of the characters, alongside the vapid cruelty of some of the others, it really made me feel her presence here like a phantom. So, those were all of the films that I watched for this video, and just to round it off, I also watched La Chimera, which is directed by Alice Rochewera, and that is a recent film starring Josh O'Connor, and she is also the director of Happy as Lazzaro, so I thought I'd also watch that film as well as Happy as Lazzaro because I think it would give me a full picture of what he's trying to say with the pics that he made. I wanted to watch this in the cinema really badly, but I couldn't because it literally didn't play anywhere in England, or London I guess, so I finally just watched it at home. This is where I would do a movie sponsorship if I was a big channel, but I just got a free trial for Movie instead. And yeah, so this film is a portrayal of the overwhelming quietness of masculine grief. That's how I would describe it. But Letterboxd would describe it as a just out of jail, crumpled English archaeologist Arthur reconnects with his wayward crew of Tromberoni accomplices, a happy-go-lucky collective of iterant grave robbers who survive by looting Etruscan tombs and fencing the ancient treasures that they dig up. Basically, they're thieves. And this film is not as wild as Happy as Lazzaro is. It's more contemplative because of Arthur's reservedness, and his grief over losing his partner is tugging him through life and keeping him in Italy when he is an English person. The film, however, is not a stationary or sluggish watch. It's punctuated with a funky little score and goofy, sped-up moments to evoke humour, anger and tiredness at the same time, to relieve us, I think, from seeing only bleakness in this world. The film's frame is also rounded, which pulls you into seeing this as camera footage. The beginning of the film starts with classic dead women, dead wife footage. It's a whole concept to itself, and it takes on the frame to continuously remind the audience of her. The camera and frames move with purpose, tilting upside down when fantasy weaves itself into a story of pent-up grief. The camera lends itself to emphasizing an evolving sense of absurdity. The director here is primed to tell the story through every means possible, including the tightly wound Arthur that Josh O'Connor is serving up here. Having now watched this film, I have to say that both Accatone and Happy as Lazzaro feel as they were on his favourites lists because of La Chimera. Having done some research, I also found out that the director has explicitly said Accatone was an influence on La Chimera, which I assume prompted Josh O'Connor to either watch it or re-watch the film into becoming a favourite, as he did this interview around the same time as the press for La Chimera. And however, he did put his praise for Alice on his Instagram story, way back when he had one. Taking a moment here to give some sort of condolences for Josh O'Connor's Instagram. He used to be so artsy and have all of these like white borders around pictures of rocks and mazes, and he's so individual in that way. You know, it was also quite reminiscent, in my opinion, to RM from BTS's old Insta feed, so if you want to be able to understand what Josh O'Connor's old Insta feed used to look like, that's a good reference. Anyway, not to say that these choices are only influenced by the fact that he was in this movie. He probably also wanted to work with Alice Rochefort because of the fact that he'd seen that movie, but the proximity of the film and him telling us his favourites, which was on the Challengers press tour, but he was also doing La Chimera press on the, you know, whatever. He was telling us his favourites around the same time as the press for that, and when he'd just done that, so I just feel like this favourites list is massively influenced by La Chimera. But generally, the films altogether tell a story of a very societally conscious person. He's not really on social media anymore, but at one point, again, I told you I'm a big fan, he was very vocally pro-Labour at one point. And it's hard to be that now, both as someone who is more famous but also living under Keir Starmer's poor excuse for a Labour government. It's hard to be pro-Labour. Anyway, clearly into some contemplative, introspective narratives led by guileless personas filled with hope. You know, regardless of whether this hope is deserved or not, Josh O'Connor seems to care for it. He has good taste, he likes the working class, he's good at his job, and those are all, in my opinion, great qualities of the working actor. A big part of why I wanted to make this video is because I want to watch some new movies, and I knew that by watching some of his favourites, I was going to be able to watch some films for a reason that I maybe never watch otherwise. You know, I just wasn't going to pick these up, I was never going to watch Accatone, like, you know, Martin Scorsese is the only other person who's seen it, no one else was recommending that shit to me. I also think, you know, films aren't very long, but they are powerful, and sometimes the most famous ones are the ones that you need to see. I have a film degree, I'm still so behind my peers in understanding and loving cinema. There are so many classics, avant-gardes and revered films that I've never seen or even really made the effort to see, and film movements that I really genuinely only know by name. You know, I said Italian neorealist at some point in this, but you know, what does that mean to me? It barely means anything. So I kind of want to spend some time discovering them bit by bit, documenting that online and finding a place to put my feelings, as well as finding a way to get good enough at talking about art. You know, that's something that's very important to me. I don't think I can get better by just, you know, writing a little film journal. I like to hear suggestions and comments and see the likes or even dislikes of people to see if I improve at actually talking about art in and of itself. Like, I have one YouTube short where I talk about Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and there's so many hate comments on it. And, you know, I already know how I feel about a piece of art when I put out a video. You know, I'm not really going to be massively changed, but it's always interesting to see what, how, and why other people perceive the thoughts that I have about pieces of art. And I think me making any video is a response to the feeling of finding that interesting, finding what other people say interesting. So yeah, thank you for watching. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you're really about it, and I'd love to see a comment on what you think about these movies and if you've seen any of these movies and how much of a fan you are of Josh O'Connor. So I hope you have a great day. See you next time, and maybe watch another video. I'll put them on screen at some point now.